Hi, everyone. This is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology. It's Monday, May 12th, and today I am sharing a few thoughts about this week's upcoming retrogrades. And I've actually already made a video discussing the technical aspects of this week's retrogrades. You got Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, all turning retrograde simultaneously this week. And like I said, I have a separate video coming out about it. But I actually had a kind of intense personal experience that I wanted to share just a little bit of and reflect on it as an example of retrogrades and hopefully maybe some thoughts and reflections that might be helpful for you in case you experience anything similar to what me and my family just went through. So um, anyway, so long story short is that there's three retrogrades happening this week. It's kind of unique that you've got Venus turning retrograde, Saturn's just turned retrograde, Jupiter's stationing to turn retrograde, all within a week. And those are all significant because Jupiter's in a difficult spot right now. Jupiter is in the sign of its fall. Saturn has just changed signs and is going to back out of Aquarius, back and move back towards Pluto and Capricorn. And of course, Venus is in its square with Neptune. So these are really significant reversals that are taking place. And what is the meaning of a reversal? This is something again I'm going to be breaking down in a video later this week in greater depth. But the gist of retrogrades is that they bring reversals, and reversals are not crazy out of the blue things. They're not, I mean, sometimes when we experience a reversal, it feels like something that's trying to thwart us, but actually back and forth, ebb and flow, come and go, the cup being filled and the cup being emptied is the nature of our daily experience in so many different ways. And we try to wall ourselves off from disruptions to the status quo, the things that make us feel normal and comfortable, in the world. But what retrogrades mean reversals, which means that every planet, a planet again called a graha in Indian astrology, something that grabs or seizes, a wandering star in the Western tradition, represents the different wandering pathways of karma in the material world, all of which is running through cycles of opposites. That was the ancient conceptualization of the karmic world, whether it's temperatures like hot and cold or expansion and contraction, dark and light. And it's a cycle, never ending, never beginning cycle is how the Greeks conceptualized it, and certainly even how ancient Indian astrologers conceptualized it. And a part of that flow is a part of that cycling is for things to go forward and then stop and turn around and go the other way. And so that's happening all the time. Retrogrades are can mean a lot of different things because in an energetic sense they just sort of depict that turn of circumstance, that turn of momentum, that turn of energy. And that's why a simple way of saying it is that they mean reversals. Reversals can be good or they can be bad, but generally speaking, we like things to keep moving forward. There's a temporary sense, and it's kind of illusory that we're progressing in time and that we're moving forward and we're accomplishing things in time. Even spiritually, we start to think that way. I'm accomplishing this lesson or I'm learning that lesson, and then in some amount of time I get to some place where finally I've accomplished something. And we have this view of everything running forward. But then there's these times where things fall back, they ebb back, they reverse back. In Bhakti Yoga, the placement of this phenomenon is not, I mean, some schools of yoga will want to do away with that. They're like, yeah, that's just duality. Let's get rid of it. All that cycling, it's an illusion. Like, let's get rid of the distinction. But in Bhakti Yoga and in other great spiritual traditions around the planet, including elements of mystical Christianity, Sufism, other belief systems, that ebb and flow, that back and forth has a spiritual version too. And it's often conceptualized as the ebb and flow of the lover and the beloved. So the lover and the beloved have to go through stages of union and separation, union and separation. And at the highest levels, it's conceptualized as a spiritual form of ecstasy, that there's a place for separation, for wherever there's a flow and there's an ebb, that it's not just a picture of some terrible inconvenience that needs to be done away with, but that there's a spiritualized version of that ebb and flow, even in, and I'm not talking about the popular or hyper-sexualized versions of Tantra, but even most people will, maybe the first time they ever get some impression of this when they study Eastern philosophy is through some of the classic images of Tantra. In Krishna Bhakti, like, for example, the soul's loving relationship with God, Krishna, is epitomized by the endless romantic, exchange and intensity, which goes through unions and separations between Krishna and Radha. It's like they're like lovers. Anyway, so I'm saying all of this because when reversals come into our life through retrogrades, there is a way in which they can help us to continue spiritualizing our consciousness and to continue deepening our personal, totally unique relationship with our soul and with our source. We discover our soul in relation to source. So I'm just going to tell you what happened at my house last night and share some thoughts. So we basically, a really random freak thing happened, and our part of our house caught on fire. And I actually expressed that I had this fear of the house catching on fire in a video that I did. I think it was the one in which I think I was talking about Kobe Bryant's death. Anyway, so some of you may remember this, but yeah, because right now there's a bunch of all of the charts of my family. I had been looking at it and going like, well, there's some rough transits. I've got Pluto opposite the sun in my chart right now, and that's the fourth house ruler of my natal chart, which is the place of home, family, property, and so forth. And my wife, and my two daughters have Uranus transits all within 1 degree, squares, conjunction, opposition, to their sun or their moon. So you've got Uranus hitting sun, moon of all three of my other family members, and then Pluto hitting my sun, all within 1 degree, all at the same time. And I was like, gosh, I've just been sitting around being like, I hope that no one gets COVID-19, or like, as an astrologer, I'm used to looking at things objectively for people. And I definitely don't go to freak out mode. I just try to be level-headed and understanding that life is full of ups and downs, and just do my best. But when you're looking at your own chart, it's very difficult. And as I've grown as an astrologer, I rarely look at my own chart anymore, because I have enough anxiety. You know what I mean? So I don't look at it very much anymore. And the same thing is definitely true for my kids and my wife, unless there's some reason specifically to look at it. I don't just spend time with it because, I've spent 10 years looking at it. And after a while, you realize you're really not objective. That's my own realization. And so at any rate, I'm not saying that should be everyone's, but I think it's hard to read our own charts sometimes anyway. But I've been worrying, like, what will these transits bring? And just as Pluto stations, turns retrograde in opposition to my sun, which also Jupiter is stationing, turning retrograde in opposition to my sun. If you wanted to just go with a traditional technique, the Jupiter opposition with Jupiter really debilitated fits in very nicely with my chart in terms of describing the fire that just happened in our house. On the other hand, if you're using outer planets, the Pluto opposition to my sun, whole lot of sense. And there's some others too, but so the nodes of the moon just changed signs into a fire sign. And that north node of the moon ends up landing in my 8th house, which can bring death, fear of death, issues that bring up your mortality, and even financial losses and things like that. Or south node moved into that sign. So all of those things were around, and I try not to go there, but I had been worrying about it. And anyway, last night, totally almost like 1 in a million type of situation, that part of our house caught on fire. And yeah, it was dramatic and sudden and shocking. And there was a lot of feelings and thoughts that went through my head. Like, first of all, where, like grabbed my girls, got them out of the room. My wife ran and got the fire extinguisher. Thank God we have one, thanks to her. Careful. She's a really good planner in that respect. Anyway, she's got Saturn in Virgo. So she's like very meticulous about things. Anyway, so she got the fire extinguisher. I took the girls, got the dog, went outside, called the fire department. The fire department came. Our house was completely filled with smoke. They got it out, a little bit of damage that actually, thankfully, was able to be, we were able to, get an estimate. It's not going to be that bad. Like we're going to be fine. And everyone was okay and no one was harmed. But, there were 4 fire trucks surrounding our house. They had to chop open a whole wall. There maybe some water damage, but they had to bring the hose in. I mean, the whole thing, it was the real deal. So what a freaky experience. I just, first of all, just it coincided with things that I had been contemplating about, in my chart, my family's chart, or, this is a possibility. Again, if you look back at some video I made, I don't remember, I mentioned that, I was freaked out about my house maybe burning down. Anyway, but then I got to thinking about it last night. We put our kids to bed and it had to air out the house. And I mean, it was just got to bed late. And then I kept waking up throughout the night, still smelling smoke and being afraid that the fire was going again somehow. And yeah, it was a little, it was traumatizing. I mean, compared to what some people go through, like nothing, like I'm not kidding myself, but scary. So, yeah, anyway, I started doing this thing, and I'm sure you guys can relate, is like when there's a sudden turn of events, and that's what retrogrades mean, sudden reversals, sudden complete turns in circumstance. Like you're going along, you think you're going in this direction, then suddenly some random freak accident occurs that you can't figure out like what the meaning of it is or why it happened or what you did to make it, you know what I mean? Like it's not like you can easily pin it on something. Just a freak accident or a turn or twist of fate or someone random that shows up in your life or whatever. You guys know what I'm talking about, I'm sure. And I started obsessing over this morning, going like, what did I do wrong? And I mean, I went on every level, obsessively, but it's the point where I really was having a hard time getting my work done because I kept sitting there like I could have killed my family. I'm like trying to take responsibility for all of it. You know what I mean? And some of that might be good, but some of it was actually ended up being not so good. Trying to figure out, what did I do to cause this? What, where was I negligent? Where is there hubris in my life? Or, just really taking taking stock and being like, I screwed something up. You know what I mean? And then after a while of doing that and just really feeling frustrated and agitated mentally because I couldn't figure it out. It wasn't clear how this accident had occurred. And it didn't feel like my nice, beautiful, logical, ordered cosmos where the karmic lessons are reasonable, and understandable. And I got the notice, I got the note, I got the memo, and I can fix that. I can do that. Thank you. Like I have Jupiter and Saturn in Libra. I love that kind of universe. You know what I mean? But it's just not like that sometimes. So reversals come. And then I ended up speaking to my guru, and I, reached out and said, I'm spinning out. I just need a few words. And he referenced 2 verses for me that really brought me back to my heart. So I wanted to share them with you guys in case you go through a reversal and are spinning out, trying to figure out what to do or how this happened or how you got into the situation that you're in. So these both come from the Srimad Bhagavatam, sometimes called the Bhagavat Purana. The Puranas are some of the great yoga philosophy / legendary folkloric stories that kind of come from another dimension. I mean, they're really amazing, and a lot of this literature is where we get a lot of our very popular, archetypal um, understanding of Indian gods and goddesses and so forth. Anyway, Srimad Bhagavatam is the famous Purana for those who are practicing bhakti. Bhakti is the science devotion of devotional union with God. So in the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a verse, and this one comes from, let's see, go back here. This one comes from the 4th canto, the 19th chapter, and the 34th verse. And it says this: "My dear king, do not be agitated and anxious because your sacrifices have not been properly executed due to providential impediments." This is talking about a king who was trying to pull off a really pious, religiously pure ceremony, and it got all messed up. And according to the rules and regulations of such ceremonies, there was a lot to feel really emotional and upset by because of this. So first of all, the sage is saying, "My dear king, do not be agitated and anxious because your sacrifices have not been properly executed due to providential impediments. Kindly take my words with great respect. We should always remember that if something happens by providential arrangement, we should not be very sorry. The more we try to rectify such reversals, the more we enter into the darkest region of materialistic thought." So that was the first verse that my guru gave me today, and just reminded me of, because it's a famous verse, and I've heard him speak on this verse before. And sometimes we try to figure out what we did wrong, and we try to take accountability and responsibility, and we try to, we're like, I want to be a good person. I want to rectify the situation. I want to try to fix whatever got broken. But sometimes, as this verse tells us, the more that we try to rectify such twists and turns of fortune, trying to figure it out and get in there and fix things, the more that we end up entangling ourselves in illusion, the more that we entangle ourselves in the darkest regions of materialistic thinking. That really helped me, and it reminded me also what a number of my teachers have said before, which is that, in our relationship with Source, it's not as important that we have it all figured out and that we're right and that we're good. There's even a Mary Oliver poem that says you don't have to be good. In other words, the goal of spiritual life is not to get an A plus in the book of goodness, because reversals are going to come, even to saintly and spiritual people. That was something that my guru said today. The people who are practicing spiritual life are going to have twists and turns that come out of nowhere and that we can't figure out. And that if God wants to illuminate our hearts from within and give us the insight, the universe wants to say, this is why, then it'll come. But it'll come in a way that's not because we're sitting there endeavoring because we slipped to B minus and now I've got to get to A plus again. Because as soon as our egos get in there and say, where did I go wrong and what did I do wrong, we're missing the presence of divinity in the fire, in the event itself. It's a burning bush, you know what I mean? And what did I do wrong misses the opportunity to take off our sandals in the holiness of the event and say, there may be one level at which this is coming because of my karma. And maybe at some point I'll understand. But also just to pause and to take off our sandals and to recognize that this is holy ground that we're standing on and that we don't need to understand it. We just need to be open to it, to be present for it. And the more that we immediately rush in to fix and rectify, sometimes the more that we end up entering into a deeper and even more troubling and illusory entanglement. So that was the wisdom that I have to share with you about reversals. I have one more verse I want to share with you. This is wisdom that I'm sharing not because I know it, it's because I need it right now. You know what I mean? So please accept my humble sharing of these things. Anyway, so then the next one comes from the 10th Canto, 14th chapter, 8th verse. And this is another really famous verse. My dear Lord, one who earnestly, and these are prayers from Lord Brahma to Krishna. Excuse me, my dear Lord, one who earnestly waits for you to bestow your causeless mercy upon him, all the while patiently suffering the reactions of his past misdeeds and offering you respectful obeisances within the heart, words, and body, is surely eligible for liberation, for it has become his rightful claim. This is a really beautiful verse too. It's sort of like describing how we should meet reversals and difficult circumstances along the way. So maybe the easiest way to explain this would be just break it down a little bit. One who earnestly waits for you to bestow your causeless mercy upon him, all the while patiently suffering the reactions of his past misdeeds and offering you respectful obeisances within his heart. So the first part, all the while patiently suffering, or one who earnestly waits for you to bestow your causeless mercy. What I love there is that mercy is not something you earn. Mercy, and what does mercy mean? Well, in Bhakti, we say that it means getting more than you deserve. Like you get something and it's not because you deserved it, and it's more than you ever could deserve. So it's not based on merit. It's just causeless blessing, causeless mercy. So one who waits for that, all the while patiently just living through the experiences of karma in the karmic world and continuing to offer you love from within the heart, words, and body. It's that person who becomes eligible for being enlightened, being liberated. For you can't be in a position to receive that blessing of spiritual life unless you've put yourself into the position to receive it. And how do you do that? You do it by just waiting patiently while offering love and devotion from the heart, and simply patiently enduring all the different kinds of things that come and go, both the good and the bad things. This is not just a message of silently suffering. It's a message of learning how to stay devoted through the ups and the downs, especially, of course, those times that come that are sudden reversals and really hard to deal with. But at any rate, I remember being in an ayahuasca ceremony years ago, and I remember that there were basically two ways that I learned to deal with really difficult spaces in ceremonies. One of them was that I would get really agitated and really reactive and try to dig down to the root of the problem and solve it. Just like, this is terrible. I'm really scared, or this is really intense, mentally or emotionally. And like, how do I get rid of it? How do I eliminate it? And I would do a kind of ruthless, obsessive digging to try to get to the root of the problem. And when that failed, then I would sort of, be going crazy, asking for help and asking, asking anyone and anything to just help. And typically when I went through that cycle, it was very extreme. It was very polarizing. And the liberation, let's say, or the release, the purge, would typically come in very terrifying and kind of hellish ways. And over time, maybe 100 ceremonies that I did when I was in the ayahuasca world, there became a different way for me of handling those kinds of situations. And basically, when I recognized that impulse of like, this is extremely discomforting, why is this happening? This is painful. This is unexpected. I don't want this, like that over time, what I realized is oh, I'm starting to go down this familiar pathway where I start to really struggle, flip out, try to obsessively figure out what I did or what I can do or where I'm wrong or how I can be right. And, then I spin out, and then eventually I'm screaming out for help and going through a really rough experience. And finally, I feel like the medicine just sort of taught me, the plant spirits, the shamans, so forth, just said, look, when that comes up, sit with it and wait. Wait for what? Wait for what? Wait for the medicine to come. Wait for the medicine to do its work. Wait for the grace, mercy, divinity to just pour in of its own accord. Just wait. Just keep your heart open, endure, be patient, and try to keep your heart open and keep kind of breathing into the heart and loving what's there in front of you, calling to things to help you love, not to help you rid or fix or become something. Okay, so my dear Lord, one who earnestly waits for you to bestow your causeless mercy, all the while patiently suffering the reactions of past karma, offering you respectful obeisances within the heart, words, body, is surely eligible for liberation, for it's become their rightful claim. So in these ceremonies, and I'm not kidding when I say that when I did that, when I actually learned how to do that, it was 10 times less painful, more natural, and the grace and the mercy always came. The light always came. And I'm not talking about good versus evil light. I'm talking about the all-encompassing, the thing that comes in and holds the opposites that felt like they were going to tear me apart and gives them all sacred place. And it was in those experiences that I realized that, so many of the things in life that we think are bad, that we want to try to think positively around or through because we see them as so bad, that they're like burning bushes, that there's an intensity to the spiritual life is alchemical, and it can be a crucible, right? So but when we learn how to be in it, we find out that through being in it, there's definitely a mercy that just sort of starts pouring through. And we become eligible for breakthroughs in consciousness. Let's say I'm giving this my own spin, but we become eligible for breakthroughs in consciousness when we can have the audacity to see the wall on fire as the burning bush, as well as being a fire that needs putting out, as well as having grief and trauma and all the normal responses as well. But how do we feed those emotions back into our devotional life so that they don't become, adversarial? If we think that spiritual life is about getting rid of emotions and responses to the dualities of life, then boy, what a bland spiritual life we're trying to cultivate. What an impossible task to try to shut off our emotions. So again, go back to Bhakti. The idea is that these dualities, these reversals that come, can be spiritualized and find their place in heaven, so to speak. But that work isn't easy. And I certainly could not do it without my guru and my teachers and, other people who are walking a spiritual path and really giving it their all. And I'm blessed and fortunate to know people like that who I think keep inspiring me to, keep coming back and looking for the divine speaking through all things. I also think that a good dose of patience and curiosity during retrogrades and periods of life in which big reversals may come is really important, because it's that patience and that curiosity that keep us interested. And interest is a sign of a real relationship being formed. If you're interested in someone or something, it means that there's a real relationship. And so I always try to remember when reversals happen, if I can bypass, my flip out, and instead allow myself to have emotional responses, but stay curious in what they are, stay curious in how they're happening, stay curious in what just appeared and what just spoke. It really helps. So anyway, that's just me processing with all of you who I love to hang out with. So I love to hear from you guys this week. How are you handling all of these reversals that are pouring in? And feel free to share a story or two now or anytime in the week as it progresses. I will have a more technical video later in the week, just diving into the nuts and the bolts of these 3 retrogrades, as well as an I Ching reading that I did about the retrogrades. But I was just moved to share this today in maybe prefacing some of the retrogrades this week a little bit. So I hope that you all have a very blessed week. And all of you who reached out to me in Instagram and Facebook, thank you so much. Your prayers, your Reiki, all the good stuff you sent is super appreciated by me and my whole family. And thankfully, we're all safe and you know, uh, lit from within a little bit more. So, all right, much love. Take it easy.